Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Ali Fenn. I am with IT Renew, and we are going to talk about circular data centers. Circular data centers, we're going to get into all the details of this, but effectively, this is technology and business model innovation that is poised to unlock immense amounts of lifetime value for IT hardware. It's all about IT hardware. And since everybody's here at a hardware conference, I assume that this might be of interest. I hope. So before we get into circular data centers, who's IT Renew? For those of you who don't know us, we are the leading provider of data center decommissioning services, which means that we have a backbone of security technology, which enables us to decommission all of the massive amounts of hardware that comes out of large-scale data centers across the globe. And so what that does is gets us totally kind of deeply entrenched with massive data center environments and this huge amount of equipment that's coming out at quote unquote the end of its life. We are also a product provider. We are the manufacturer of a line of products that's called Sesame, which is the first ever line of fully warranted, recertified data center storage and compute equipment, open. And the combination of those two things has enabled us already to return greater than $1 billion worth of lifetime value of hardware assets to our partners and customers. And we're going to talk about how those three things kind of form the foundation of what we think is the next chapter for data center and IT hardware and this notion of end of life at massive scale, which is circular data centers. So why do we care? Well, we are standing as an industry at the precipice of a massive opportunity financially and also a massive imperative, right? You guys are all familiar in this room with the scale at which this sector operates, and it's growing endlessly. There's no end in sight. And we think there's a huge financial opportunity associated with really rethinking how things happen, and then also an imperative to do so from a sustainability perspective. And very beautifully, those two things, maximization of financial value and sustainability, directly coincide. So the first thing that's a huge opportunity is that there is somewhere on the order of greater than $50 billion of value, which is currently being left on the table in large-scale data center environments. This has to do with the fact that products are designed and then run and then decommissioned in kind of siloed operations with oftentimes value recovery as an afterthought. We'll get into the very specifics of this, but there's a massive opportunity for everybody who's running large-scale data centers to really rethink the way they can realize lifetime value of assets. Now, on the flip side of that, there are a plethora of global markets that are currently constrained, and they're constrained in ways that the hyperscalers may not be, things like budgets. They're also constrained by traditional business models and traditional economics of how they can access compute and storage equipment. And coincidentally and nicely, those two things go hand in hand. So on the one hand, you have a massive amount of equipment that represents potential value for the hyperscalers to recover if that value could be turned into something. And it turns out there's a ready market for that something, and it turns out it's product. So we'll talk about what that product looks like in a minute. At the same time, the growth opportunity is kind of limitless, right? We have half the world not still even online. There's tremendous economic growth opportunity and everything associated with if we could bring product to catalyze those markets. There's huge opportunity for everybody. And then finally, as this industry is growing to the extent that it is, we're creating a pretty massive sustainability challenge. We think we have a good answer to that in circular data centers. We'll talk more about it, but this is not small, right? The amount of that 368,000 tons is the amount of server tonnage that's going to go into just the top 20 data center operators in the next few years. It's a tremendous amount of equipment that left untouched is going to create a big problem for all of us downstream, and we're going to argue here today that we can turn potentially negative things into very, very positive power of this industry. So we're talking about IT hardware. So the next obvious question is, does hardware matter, right? Isn't it about power? Isn't it about efficiency in the data center? Well, it turns out we all did a pretty good job of solving the power problem, and we have made tremendous gains in efficiency at that level within data centers. And now the focus is shifting back to hardware, and there's some reasons. This is just a picture of hyperscale IT spend hitting $50 billion in 2021, growing about, compute capacity is growing 30% a year, storage 33% a year. It's not going to slow down. On the enterprise side, enterprise infrastructure almost $40 billion last year and growing north of 25%. At the same time you have this growth, you have Moore's law in decline or demise. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with this issue. It's physics, and we can argue about whether it's slightly faster or slower, but I think there's no disputing the trend that we're getting less kind of efficiency gains that we relied on traditionally to help us kind of combat this ever increasing need for compute. So what that translates into is that when you look at hardware as a percent of overall data center TCO, we're currently just over about 50%. And as we go forward over the next 10 years, that 52% becomes 67%. So the point of this is, if we're going to focus on TCO gains in the data center, this is a really good place to focus, right? So that's the upstream side, right? We're spending a lot of money on hardware. We got to find a way to do better with that if we're going to find a way to drive our overall data center economics. On the flip side, downstream markets are blocked, and it's hard to quantify, but there's a million ways there's a million different data points. I pulled just 3 that I think are really important. The first one is, and Khashoggi referred to this in the keynote this morning, IDC is saying, we're going to go up to 175 zettabytes of data in 2025 in the data sphere being created. I just boiled that down to just purely on the enterprise side of data that's stored, not even data that is being created, but enterprise data storage. And you're at north of 13 zettabytes, which at today's economics, even assuming trends in Kreider's law and everything that drives storage prices down and so forth, you're still over about $1.5 trillion of spend, which is just ridiculous, right? We have to find a way to deliver breakthrough economics in addition to all the great technology advances that are happening on compression and everything you're hearing about here. Similarly, different segment, if you look at banks, the mega banks spend double what the mid-tier banks spend on IT infrastructure. So another way to think about this is, okay, well, those guys are constrained. What could they do if we catalyzed, double the compute cycles or double the capacity for those budget-constrained environments that are currently not able to do what they could do otherwise? And then lastly, sort of on the imperative side, we've got about a $100 billion gap currently in what it would take to achieve the ICT goal of universal access. So if we want to get the whole world online, there's about a $100 billion funding gap. So again, the point here is just we have to figure out a way, in addition to technology innovation, that we can bring business model innovation to bear to help kind of unleash some of this stuff that's currently constrained. So our thesis is that circular data centers are the answer. Circular data centers fundamentally integrate internal analysis of total cost of ownership and external market. So what you get then is you get to think about, okay, let's think about equipment over its truly full life cycle, and what happens if we do that? And what happens is you get kind of a multiplier, right? You think about optimization of an initial lifetime and time, then you think about, okay, where could my gear go, and what's the return I get on that gear? And then you think about downstream customers who can actually purchase recertified equipment that's coming out of the upstream players, and then you get the sustainability multiplier. So if we think about circular data centers, we're trying to get that snowballing and that acceleration and multiplier on all of our IT. So what does this look like? And I'm going to go fast because I'm getting out of time here. We used to, we used to basically take equipment from hyperscale data centers and then harvest it for components and sell it off as best we could. And in a circular data center, you try to keep things in their highest value for much longer. So you think about internal reuse cycles, you think about recertification and sales of things as systems, you think about remanufacture of things as sales of systems into different non-data center use cases, and only then do you harvest for components and sell them, because that's the least value, right? If you do that and you optimize the mix from that first only selling for components to a case where you start to reuse a certain amount of equipment, you start to remanufacture things as systems, suddenly if you take just 150,000 square foot data center, you get about a $250 million value recovery opportunity over the course of a short number of years. For anybody who's running a large-scale operation, if you multiply that by 10, you're at $2.5 billion of value recovery for the upstream, and the implications of that are massive. And again, the issue here is that that opportunity is what then catalyzes the product that opens up all the other global markets. So another way to think about that is if I'm running a large-scale data center, you can see that doing that optimization for a circular data center, I suddenly get about 30% more bang for my buck, and that bang for my buck is product that goes into other markets at very disruptive economics and enables all of this unblocking we're talking about. Lastly, everybody wins. There's a tremendous amount of waste. There's also a tremendous amount of embodied energy that comes from manufacture of new systems that can be deferred, all also a benefit of circular data centers. So what does it take? Open is necessary. You're all here. I don't need to evangelize about open compute. This is a great platform. It's a necessary building block. It's not sufficient. Alone, it cannot do the job. We are, as OCP outside of the board member companies, about 1% of the total server market share is OCP. 4 to 4.5% of the ODM market is OCP. Still a long way to go. And really the question is, how do we take that slide and make OCP available for everybody, right? We think circular data centers represent the answer. So what does it take? It's really about product and services. On the one hand, you can't just like take stuff and throw it over the wall, right? You need hardware and software engineering to be able to take this stuff out of environments and then fully recertify, test, and be able to provide quality gear into the marketplace. You need an open source software stack to enable it. There's a lot of work going on in this. We're involved in it, Facebook's involved in it, Google's involved in it. You need this global operations and logistics footprint, which is the part of IT Renew's business I talked about at the beginning. You have to be able to orchestrate this thing globally across markets, from one location to many others. You need to make those downstream markets, right? You need to create a diversity of channels. And then we have to all anticipate doing this at massive scale. So we have to do this in a way that it's built on a technology platform that facilitates learning and automation and orchestration, right? So services and products, and frankly, this is my plea to everybody, it takes also kind of a changed mindset and a shared ethos that this is worth doing and that we care about the financial value and the impact globally that this can have. So to put a finer point on what the link is between that upstream opportunity and the downstream, it's product innovation. All those things on the previous slide kind of go into enabling product viability. This is a picture of a Discovery chassis, which is a Sesame product, which you guys can see right over here at our booth. This is, as I said initially, first ever line of recertified open compute and storage systems and fully warranted. So this is really important. Like decommissioning in the past has been able to sell systems into other markets, but you do kind of as is, which doesn't really create opportunity. Now we're talking about fully warranted, certified, supportable products into a variety of markets globally. Rack solutions for data centers, other form factors for people who are working in the edge, people who are smaller customers, people in developing markets, lots of form factors. Availability of supply, big problem for a lot of companies outside the largest of the large data centers. Suddenly we're able to take this massive supply that we have, repackage it, certify it, and get it into markets that couldn't otherwise access it. Quality has to be paramount. We're seeing failure data on these systems that's less than new systems, less than 0.5% in the field. And then disruptive economics, right? This is about breaking through those budget-constrained environments And as a rough example, you can get about double the compute cycles with this recertified line of equipment at the same or better quality for double the compute cycles, about equal CapEx. Last slide is just, this is happening. It's real. We're already selling Sesame in 15 countries on 5 continents around the world. We sell it into a variety of second, third, fourth tier data center environments. We sell it into IoT infrastructure. We sell it into edge compute environments. And this is really, this is the link, right? There is an opportunity for whether you're a hyperscaler and you're trying to save millions, billions of dollars, whether you're in the middle and you want to make some of that but something different, or whether you actually are a consumer of potentially recertified equipment that lets you say, hey, I can optimize for workloads and get way more bang for my buck. So that's the circular data center thesis. We are right over here at booth C15, and we're also doing a talk that goes deep dive into the Sesame product line and has a really cool customer on stage with us talking about how they're going to use it at 425 in one of the conference halls. So hopefully everybody comes and checks it out, and hopefully we can help everybody make more money and do the right thing. Thanks, guys.